Samsung's big drives, data center dust bunnies, Equinix goes gigawatt, Cisco Coreweaves an investment, Wordpress stops your engines, Oscium geeks out, and who taps the tappers in this week's episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown for Wednesday, October the 9th. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I hope that you all brought your teddy bears to the office today, because it is National Bring Your Teddy Bear to Work Day. If you missed out on that opportunity, though, make sure you take this chance to call your parents and invite them out to lunch, because it's National Take Your Parents to Lunch Day. I'm going to have to pass on that, though, because my favorite co-host from the other side of the world is a little bit far away to take to lunch today, and that would be my good friend, Alistair Cook. Al, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom, and I will attempt to bring as much snarkiness as I can, as I'm well known for it. Also, I would like to point out that you're not old enough to be my father, nor am I old enough to be yours, but I will take my father out to lunch.
Yeah, you know what? It's close enough. But the good news is that to tide you over until we get to that point, we have lots of great stories coming your way. And I'm going to go ahead and jump into the big one, big being about a terabyte in size, because Samsung Electronics has started mass production of the industry's first 1 terabyte quad-level cell, QLC, 9th generation V-NAND drive designed to offer high-performance, high-capacity solution for, yeah, you guessed it, AI applications. Also consumer products and enterprise SSDs, but mostly that AI thing. This technology features a 286-layer structure providing 86% higher density than previous generations, along with significant improvements in write performance, data retention, and reduced power consumption. You know, all the things you want in a drive. Samsung aims to strengthen its leadership in the growing enterprise SSD market, specifically around those pesky little applications that need AI. So, Al, a 1 terabyte super fast SSD that's an AI-focused drive, what do you make of this?
Well, of course, we know this just continues on the cycles we've seen before. Right? Higher density, smaller power consumption, and hero numbers that just keep going up and up. I like the idea of having the lower power consumption, so read and write performance on these drives is lower power demand than on previous drives, and that really helps when you're starting to produce these things as really high density servers. So we're seeing more adoption of things like the ruler, the extended small form factor formats of SSDs, or the massive capacity ones that are still in the U2 form factors. The ability to pack these things closely together is really important. And so high capacity and then not having huge amounts of power. We already know AI data centers are struggling with the amount of power that the GPUs require. So less storage power requirements has got to be a good thing. It is, of course, an arms race between Samsung and the other vendors, and of course we will see over time more of these hero numbers coming out. The proof of the pudding, of course, is in the shipping product that gets in front of customers, that are being integrated into solutions that are being supported by the software platforms that sit on top. So the SSD doesn't sit by itself, but of course it can be one of those fundamentally limiting elements, particularly in AI training workloads where we do a lot of checkpointing of data. We need to hose out a lot of data from the GPUs out onto these SSDs, because while we're doing that, those SSDs are idle. And so the performance for these SSDs is absolutely critical on that. 86% increased density and 30 to 50% increased write performance is a really significant thing for those AI workloads, because while those GPUs are idle, they're really expensive still. So yeah, it continues that what we see of this massive explosion in the size of storage. There is never a storage recession. There's always growth. And I think we will continue to see more and higher density storage along the way. And of course, as that storage gets larger and higher density, we'll find lots of ways to fill it up with new types of data, particularly the massive training sets that are being used in AI applications. Information Week had an interesting story this week about security risks associated with dust and fluff accumulating inside data centers, in particular inside servers inside data centers. The story seemed to say that the danger here was about overheated servers because all of that dust gets in the way of airflow. Tom, is there a problem keeping these things clean and cool?
I don't know how to break it to you people, but the data center's not as clean as you think it is. Yeah, those white raised floors look super pretty whenever you've got these harsh fluorescent lights shining down everywhere. But you're also talking about moving a crapload of air around in these things. And it may be clean above it, but it's definitely not clean below it. Anytime you've ever had to pry up one of those raised floor tiles, you know that underneath there is just like it's crammed, and it's not like dirt. Like if you go to your house and you've got mud and stuff that's been tracked around, that's one thing, right? But it's that fine particulate dust that settles all over every surface of your house. You know, no matter how much you do, you're gonna have to go back and you're gonna have to wipe it down with a rag or a Swiffer or Pledge or something like that. Well, imagine that dust is suspended in the air all the time. And the only thing that stops it is the filter inside of a server that's on the back of a fan. So you get this super fine particulate dust that's basically blocking airflow. You're probably thinking to yourself, that's not that big of a deal, right? Well, in the article, it was kind of interesting because they thought that at least the common wisdom was that it was actually counterfactual. They thought that it was a lot cleaner because there's no moving parts. Well, I got news for you folks. Hard drives are sealed. Dust getting on a hard drive doesn't happen. I mean, particles of dust can crash hard drive heads. This is more about what happens whenever you miniaturize that stuff and remove the moving parts. You add more silicon chips into a server, and then you squash it down into a single rack unit or into 2 rack units. You're generating significantly more heat than you used to. And so what happens is that the fans have to spin even faster in order to be able to move that waste heat out of the system. And that's even when you think about creative things like heat pipes and all the other massive active cooling systems that we've put in there. So what ends up happening is your servers are hotter, they're blowing more air, which means more air is being forced through the servers, which is causing the dust to accumulate faster. And there is absolutely no way to hermetically seal a data center. Well, I guess unless you're one of those weird Google people that's going to like take a container-sized rack setup and just submerge it in oil. But then you've got other problems that you have to worry about. So I think it's interesting that they're bringing this up. It's kind of one of those, boy, I bet you never thought about this. It's something to consider. But right now, I don't necessarily know that there's a way to fix that, because the other thing, if you think about the way that you do it in a home, is you put like a HEPA filter in front of it, right? And you trap all that dust. Well, that's going to reduce the airflow into the servers anyway. And they're already rated for a certain amount of airflow per second, and if you reduce that in any way by putting a filter in the way to help, you're actually going to cause overheating. And I've seen what happens when one of these things slags out, and you don't want to be anywhere around it. It's like a little mini volcano. All right, Equinix has a joint venture between its partners GIC and Canada Pension Plan Investment Board to build multiple data centers in campuses across the U.S. The data centers will, of course, boost AI and cloud growth for Equinix customers in the U.S. And we've seen some statements that have been put out by other people in the industry that have said, hey, we need to just build as many data centers as possible to let AI grow as fast as it can, because we were never going to hit those cloud targets anyway about reducing carbon usage and clean energy offset. So let's just go hog wild building AI stuff. And it looks like Equinix may be jumping on that bandwagon. Al, what do you think about Equinix trying to meet the demand in this craze?
Well, I think there's a couple of pieces in this, and one of them is, as you say, this is a 1.5 gigawatts of data centers that they're planning to build. I say, sorry, it is 1.5 gigawatts of data centers. That's a heck of a lot of data center power that's going to be required, and cooling and all of those infrastructures. So yeah, we need a few more trees to handle that, and hopefully it'll be in locations where some of the power is a bit greener than in other locations. One of the interesting things was GIC. I had a quick look around to see what GIC is, and apparently it's the Singapore government's state wealth fund. And they've been a partner with Equinix as well in previous deals. So GIC and Equinix have partnered together to build data centers in Malaysia as well. So this is not something completely new. What is new is getting the Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board on board as well for this $15 billion worth of spending. Sorry, $15 billion worth of spending. And it's a lot of data centers, it's a lot of AI. I wonder if they're going to get the GPUs for this. There is somewhat of a problem getting hold of high-powered GPUs for building these AI data centers. Of course, we know that Samsung's now going to be able to provide them plenty of storage out of those 1 terabyte SSDs. Plenty of other providers will offer as well. I think one of the challenges is identifying the business value. There is still an AI land grab going on, and I think there is still the story that AI is a discrete and separate thing itself rather than being part of the application you build. So I think that might be a good place where Equinix is set up with these high performance data centers that they build out for their customers to occupy, and to be able to meld together the line of business applications that customers are placing on these Equinix data centers with some of the more advanced AI services that really make a lot of sense to rent as a service rather than buying for yourself if you're a large enterprise customer. There's a vast amount of cost and specialization to build out a good high performance AI data center. And so using a provider like Equinix or one of the other cloud providers seems to be a much better way of utilizing these AI resources. And of course, service providers like Equinix are very good at running their resources at very high utilization where they're very cost effective and efficient to use, more so than we see in enterprise organizations that tend to be much more conservative in their loading. So I think this is a really good thing in terms of having capacity to run AI workloads. But I'm still a little cynical about companies actually getting on board to deliver business value, identifying how their business is going to get better, how they're going to get a return on that investment in their AI infrastructure. And these are bigger concerns for me than necessarily the availability of vast amounts of resource to meet some hypothetical requirement. Of course, still in the same space, Cisco is apparently looking to make an investment into Coreweave. Coreweave themselves have just recently had a Series C funding round earlier this year, and they're a popular company for cloud-based GPU services. Cisco's reported to looking to invest and raise the evaluation of Coreweave to nearly $23 billion. Analysts are wondering if this is a chance for Cisco to influence the transition from InfiniBand for these GPUs towards Ethernet fabrics, of course, Cisco being the champion of everything over Ethernet. Tom, you're a CCIE and presumably you believe Cisco has a really good story in this. What is the story for Cisco with Coreweave?
The story is that they need a customer that they can believe in that will consume this and not just rip it out when the next best thing comes along. I know that Ultra Ethernet Consortium has been working really, really hard on, cloud providers because they're the ones who have the most to gain from sticking with a consistent infrastructure. If everything that you've already cabled is Ethernet focused, then if NVIDIA comes to you and goes, no, we got to do InfiniBand over all of this stuff because that's what our customers want and that's our best performance, they might be just a little bit hesitant, I guess would be a good way to put it, because they don't want to have to run all this new cabling. And worse yet, as soon as you do that, that pretty much dedicates that pod area to being that workload. You can't really move it around to different areas, and that actually impacts things like SLAs. So what, companies really want to do is they want to have a standard technology across all of it. And what Cisco is hoping to do is by kicking in a, billion or so dollars into Coreweave, what they're going to get out of it is a company that is going to look at everything and go, well, Cisco did give us a whole bunch of money. Perhaps we could try out some of the things that they're doing to help with uptick. Because the counterpoint to that is if all of these companies are basically using NVIDIA anyway, which from the sounds of it, they kind of all are, what happens if NVIDIA decides that what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, we're going to dump InfiniBand for this, but we want you to use NVLink instead, which is our proprietary protocol that enables GPU to GPU communications, and you're just moving money from one bucket to the other. Now, here's the kind of the behind the scenes thing. It feels a lot like late 19th century Europe, where everybody is everybody else's enemy, but everybody who's my enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. As long as NVIDIA claims that they can support multiple different types of transports, even if they're lower performance, then nobody can get mad at them for trying to corner the market and create a monopoly. Likewise, Cisco is going to support pretty much any DPU out there, whether it's their own homegrown versions, if it's anything from AMD with the Xilinx acquisition, or if it's Bluefield 3. They really want to support Bluefield 3, though, because that is NVIDIA. And so the more active they can be in providing solutions for Bluefield, the more likely people are to maybe pick Cisco, because what they're hoping is that the companies that are familiar with Cisco are going to want to go with them over something that, while is highly performant, is perhaps untested from your engineering talent. And what Cisco's hoping is that they don't just decide to cashier everybody who works on that stuff, hire a whole bunch of new people who are familiar with NVLink and call it a day. All right, Matt Mullenweg, who is the co-founder of WordPress, believes that WP Engine is profiting off of the confusion between the WordPress brand and the WP Engine brand, which of course we all know that the WP and WP Engine stands for WordPress. WP Engine customers were briefly blocked from accessing the WordPress software distribution servers. That also prevented security updates to WP Engine-based websites. Now, after this flap hit the news, of course, access has been restored, but now Mullenweg says that it's time for WP Engine to pay up. They want millions of dollars for the license fees to be able to use the WordPress trademarks in WP Engine. As you might understand, WP Engine is a little bit hesitant to pay these fees. Al, would you pay up?
You know, it's a difficult situation. I can see some sense in Matt Mullenweg's point of view, and it seems to very much be Matt Mullenweg's point of view, that WP Engine is providing a service that looks on the surface similar to the WordPress.com service. Now, WordPress.com and WordPress aren't the same thing. WordPress.com is the commercial hosting provided by Matt Mullenweg's company at Automatic, and that's the company that Matt wants WP Engine to pay for a license, because it's the trust, that the foundation that's behind WordPress doesn't actually own the trademark. As this sort of separation of entities was done, the trademark was moved, and it's Automatic, not WP Engine. WordPress that owns WordPress. So I'm kind of confused here by the drive. I think one of the really telling things in this for me was around culture. So there must have been some grumbling inside of Automatic, because there was a post up that Matt offered any staff member at Automatic a very generous redundancy or severance package if they were uncomfortable with the moves he'd made. 8% of his staff took that offer. Now, you've got to expect that there are 2 or 3% who are ready to move, and if you make it worthwhile, they'll move, but 8 is a little higher. In terms of where I see this, the thing is that the losers here are WP Engine's customers like myself. So I needed to update some plugins and update the latest versions on some of the sites that I run, and those live on WP Engine. I've been a customer for WP Engine for a long time. Incidentally, I have other sites that are on WordPress.com. I went to do these updates, couldn't do the updates. A couple of days later, could do the updates, but apparently that stopped again on the 1st, or was due to stop on the 1st of October. So maybe I can't do updates again. It does feel like it's a bit of a ransom thing. But Matt's point is that Automatic is providing the resources to run these update servers, and really WP Engine should run their own. They should be a contributor to the community in a bigger way than he feels they are. And Matt particularly calls out Silver Lake Partners as being one of the investors in WP Engine who just want to get a return and don't really care about any community part. So I can see some of where he's coming from in it, and I imagine that since this has been going on as WP Engine and WordPress.com being sort of parallel companies for 10 years, it starts to really great when a non-contributing company is making great profits off things that you're contributing to. In a soup of words that are kind of made up, Oscium, well, maybe not so made up, Oscium is acquiring MetaGeek from Orvik. Specifically, Oscium is getting the MetaGeek brand along with the code for the MetaGeek tools, like the Channelizer and NSSID, tools for doing investigation and reconnaissance on wireless networks. Co-founder Brian Tuttle is returning to the company to lead software development. Tom, MetaGeek has presented at Tech Field Day in the past. What do you make of this news? Are we going to see Oscium at Tech Field Day soon?
I would hope so. I mean, the press release was bylined in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So Oscium, if you want to sit down and have a chat one day about what you're doing, I'd love to. We can go out to lunch at Ted's and get some great Mexican food. If you're from Oklahoma City, you know where that is. But I think this is an interesting move because when you look at what's kind of being moved around, first of all, MetaGeek did present at Wireless Field Day 2 was actually the very first time that they did, and it was amazing. Like they brought in Channelizer, and that's the first time I ever actually got to play around with some really cool wireless tools back when I was still an engineer. And just kind of following their progression over the time. They've always been this smaller shop. Ryan Woodings has done a great job putting a great team together over there and building some really cool stuff. But then they got bought by Avik a little while back, and so you know how it is when your small company gets folded into a bigger company. They still have the MetaGeek identity, but a lot of what they're doing is kind of maybe being split and moved around a little bit. And so what Oscium said was, well, there's still value in what you're offering. So we want to buy that back. We want to buy back the name. We want to buy back the tool code. That was one of the things that they really wanted to get because they want to continue to maintain these tools, but also maybe build on them. Because one of the things that I've heard from my friends in the wireless community is they want a Mac version of Channelizer, since most of them use Macs. And I know that development actually makes that a lot harder than you might think. Speaking of development, Brian Tuttle's coming back. That's a big win for them because Brian was one of the co-founders of MetaGeek along with Ryan Woodings. Ryan, however, is not. Ryan is going to stick around over at Avik, and he's actually keeping most of the MetaGeek staff that were there during the acquisition at Avik. So I think what you're seeing here is you're seeing one of the co-founders wanting to get control of the brand again and maybe continue the development that he thinks is important. And then you've got some folks who are honestly probably pretty comfortable with where they're at, and they're going to continue to do the things they're doing using their expertise to make Avik's products better. So this little bit of a fracturing, I don't even know that I would call it that. Maybe it's a reallocation of assets, means that we get a healthy company back on the market developing these tools, because right now the market's pretty hot. I remember that when MetaGeek presented for that first time, they actually co-presented with this little startup company that was doing spectrum analysis that you probably hadn't have heard of at the time, called Ekahau. Any wireless people watching this right now are giggling because Ekahau is now considered to be the dominant spectrum analysis company out there. So I think when you see kind of how the market has transitioned and moved and changed, there's going to be a lot more people who are going to want to go back to this model of creating startups around tools and seeing if they can make headway in the market, or quite honestly probably end up getting bought. So props to the folks at Oscium for picking this up, and welcome back, Brian. I can't wait to see what you guys have in store, and I'm looking forward to some great new tools in the wireless space. Right, a fun closer look story. Well, maybe not so fun if you work for a telecom company, because there has been this enormous cyber attack that's been attributed to groups backed by the Chinese government, and a lot of telecom providers are worried. So this new report came out, and we linked to the Wall Street Journal article, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other ones out there, that there is a group. The name of the group is Salt Typhoon, which I believe was my AOL password in the 90s. They have had months-long access into the network infrastructures of companies that you may have heard of, like AT&T, Verizon, and Lumen Technologies. That access includes visibility over the lawful intercept functionality. If you're not familiar with that, that is basically the internet version of a wiretap. Lawful intercept means that if a law enforcement agency comes to a provider and provides them with a warrant, they must tap that traffic. Well, like all network taps, it's probably on by default. I don't know that for sure. But basically what happens is that Salt Typhoon hackers appear to be engaged in data collection. They're out there to just consume as much data as they can, including things about U.S. businesses and the businesses that they do business with. And there are reports that Salt Typhoon has compromised systems in smaller telcos outside of the U.S. And as we mentioned at the top, Salt Typhoon is attributed to the Chinese government. So at this point, there's no telling what's going on. Al, where do we want to start with this one?
How about we start by just turning the internet off, because it seems to be the only way that we could stop any sort of intrusion. We hear these stories year after year, month after month, of hackers from somewhere. Of course, we only hear about the hostile ones, not our outbound hacker attacks. I mean, our state reconnaissance investigations. It seems inevitable that if you're connected to the internet, that somebody is going to find a way into your network. over time. If there is enough money and enough time, it's a little bit like having monkeys and typewriters. Eventually, your data is going to be exfiltrated and it's going to be teaching. In this case, I think possibly teaching an AI system within whoever the real backers of Salt Typhoon are, teaching an AI system how to interact with the US, in this case, organizations, because there's a huge amount of insight and communication going on here. If you think of this as being all of the emails and web requests and all of the transfers of data between customers on these networks, that's a huge amount of information. Now, hopefully, the majority of the sensitive data has been encrypted in transit, that we're not just trusting that the telcos have these fully secured networks. Hopefully, we're working on the idea of having far less trust. I think if you're anywhere in financial, you have to do this. You have to encrypt over these links. And hopefully a larger numbers of more critical organizations, particularly the infrastructure organizations. We know there's been a tendency to target things like power generation and again, telcos' actual operations as a way of potentially enacting some electronic warfare in the future. So hopefully these things are a little more protected than just clear text messages being sent across these telcos' networks. How much confidence do you have of that, Tom? Do you think people are actually encrypting data, or are they just trusting that these telcos are perfect?
Hold on, let me consult my encrypt by default table. None. And I'll tell you why. Because if lawful intercept could be quickly defeated by everybody encrypting things, we wouldn't have lawful intercept, or we would have rules in the US that prevented certain kinds of traffic from being encrypted. The fact that the government hasn't had to pass those laws yet tells you how many people are doing this. Oh, yeah, it's a VPN tunnel. I don't care. Well, all you got to do is put some kind of a tap on the end of the exit of that tunnel, and you don't need to worry about anything. I agree with you. Encrypt everything by default. Trust no one. Don't even trust your grandmother. Because if you are encrypting by default, then you know for a fact that the only people who can decrypt that message are the people on the other end, and you don't have to worry about these kinds of things. You can just kind of, oh, whatever. More worrying to me is, I think back to the Fifth Element. You know, everybody loves the Fifth Element, right? And you remember Zorg was giving all of these guns to basically freedom fighters, if you want to call it that. And he was like, hey, just do whatever you want with them. What Zorg was really doing was he was field testing his equipment to make sure that it actually worked according to plan. Now, I want you to just replace Zorg with the Chinese government. I want you to replace those freedom fighters with Salt Typhoon. And I want you to replace that really futuristic-looking plastic gun with hacking tools. So now what you have is a nation state who is sponsoring a group to test out hacking tools, 1, to see if they work, 2, to see how persistent they can be, and 3, to find out what the response time for your cyber teams is. And right now, the answer is really good, really long, and really bad. So I think that what's going to happen is that, yes, the data is valuable because they were in passive mode. And we all know, thanks to that beautiful movie Jurassic Park, prey distinguishes itself through movement. So what's happening is that when they get into these systems, they're persisting by staying quiet. They're collecting data. They're finding ways to dump it that aren't raising alarms. Tricking DLP systems, doing like oil rig style DNS exfil, whatever. There's a lot of different ways they can do it, and that also gives them a capability to test to see how fast they can get out of the system before they get caught. Then they get caught and they get rolled up. Well, can't touch Salt Typhoon because they're probably not in the U.S. We'll put out an Interpol warrant for them. We'll catch those dastardly robbers. But more importantly, what happens now is that the people who are developing these weapons have an actual field test. They have real data, and they know where they need to tweak it to prevent things from happening. So maybe they're fine with the amount of time that it took for them to be detected, but what they're actually wanting to do is they're wanting to double the throughput so they can exfiltrate more information. Or maybe they're going to configure it so that if they do get caught, there's kind of a dead man switch payload delivery that mass encrypts the whole system or just deletes all the files. No matter what, that's a valuable resource. Because if you are a fan of watching any current event thing, you know that the Chinese government has designs on doing a lot of things in the world that maybe are unsavory. Potentially invading places that they probably shouldn't. And what better way to do an invasion than to completely shut down all the telecommunications systems of the place that you're trying to get into? If you don't think that that couldn't happen, I want you to rewind the clock back to the initial Ukraine invasion, because that's exactly what happened to the Ukrainians. They faced a massive denial of service attack even before the first tank rolled into Ukraine, because it turns out that in a modern war, hours can make a huge difference. So I think what we're seeing is almost like a field test of new tools and weapons. And so far, at least to me, I think they passed.
You know, the scary thing is we only know what we've detected. What we don't know is what we haven't detected. So it's entirely possible that there is a deeper layer to this, that what we've found is the sort of the first layer of the intrusion tools that's most easy to detect and is the most active, and that gives then the attacking team a little bit of warning that they're on notice and they need to, you know, in the same way that as an organization that's under attack increases its security stance and says we're going to take more false positives because we know we're under attack. Well, the same thing happens red team side, right? We know we've been spotted, so we're going to lay low for a little while and just see where else we get. We may only have detected the first layer. This may go 7 layers deep, trying not to get too paranoid, but of course in national security circles, paranoia is table stakes. And having multiple layers, much depth, is also table stakes. I think you're absolutely right around the warfare. Information is absolutely vital on a modern battlefield. We know that the ability to see what's going on, the fog of war, is a real thing that gets in the way of any kind of movement and coordination. And so absolutely this could well be the testing of some tools that might get used at another time. And we do know there's been quite a bit of saber rattling around the South China Sea and the Taiwan Straits recently. Hopefully that doesn't bring us to another war zone, because we have way too many of those at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, the good news is that you don't have to worry about us laying low, because we have a lot of field day events coming up that are going to be talking about actually some of the things we talked about here in the show. Coming up next week, I'm going to actually be in California, in San Francisco, for Security Field Day. Al will be joining me there, along with Citrix, Dell, DigiCert, and SonicWall. We got a great lineup of presentations October 16th and 17th. And then after that, we have Cloud Field Day. Al, I think you're just going to be sticking around in San Francisco, taking in the bridge, doing all the cool stuff. We're going to be hearing from companies like Cumulo and VMware. And then we're going to take a little bit of a break, but I'm coming back the first week in November, because I'm going to be there for Networking Field Day 36, talking to Arista, Itential, Meter, first-time presenter, as well as Elicity. So we are very excited to have them taking place during that week. And then we have more events coming up, so make sure you check out techfieldday.com. We have a calendar of all the things through the rest of the year, and we're also adding the events that are starting off 2025. So if you are one of those people who likes to plan out and get your viewing schedule set up, which I highly recommend, just tell your boss that you're going to block all these times, because this is super important. You don't want to miss this stuff. Make sure you check that out. Al, if people want to check out some of the stuff that you do, where's the best place to find that?
Well, you can find me personally. You can find Alistair Cook on LinkedIn. I've been posting a lot of things from the recent events that I've been at on LinkedIn. You can find me as Demitas NZ, the NZ being because I'm here in New Zealand most of the time. Although, as Tom says, I'll be joining him for Security Field Day next week, and the following week will be the first time I'm leading an event. So Cloud Field Day 21 will be my first event as a lead. And we've also got Platform 9 coming along, as well as Cumulo and VMware. So definitely check out those events, and you'll hear far more from me at Cloud Field Day, and you'll probably hear something from me around Security Field Day a bit too.
Absolutely. And you'll hear more out of us every Wednesday in the afternoon when we publish an episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. You can find us on our YouTube channel, or you can find us in your favorite podcast application of choice. Just look for the Gestalt IT Rundown. We're also streaming it on TechStrong TV, and you can check out past episodes and other great stuff that we do both on TechStrong TV as well as Futurum Group. We're going to be back next Wednesday. Well, I'm not, and Al's not, because we're going to be at Security Field Day, but Stephen will be here with another great co-host to talk about all the IT news of the week. Hopefully we don't make some of that news. We prefer to kind of stay under the radar that way. But if we do, you'll hear about it here first. And we hope that you tune in every Wednesday, and make sure that you leave a comment under this video and let us know what you thought. If you're listening to us as a podcast, leave a rating and review so everybody knows what we're all about, because we love to get new listeners, and we love to let them know that we're in for a little bit of a snarky ride, but some people really enjoy that. So for Tom and for Al, thank you very much for tuning in this week. We hope to see you very soon, and we'll be back with more great content.